Hi everyone, very excited to be here. So the project I'm going to talk about is match phases in practice. A very brief introduction on who's been part of this team. So I'm Edoardo Ghezzi, data analyst for FC Lugano in Switzerland. I have a statistics and data science university background, and I've been working in Lugano for the past 2 years now, in close contact with both the technical staff and the sporting director. And I'm the only one with this background in Lugano, but I also collaborate daily with my colleagues from Chicago in the Chicago Fire. Although Hadi is not here, it's been a collaboration with him, and he's a doctoral student at ETH Zurich, and his main focus is on identifying tactical formations from tracking data, and he's also a teaching assistant in the soccer analytics course the university offers. So the need of analyzing matches via video and detecting how each team behaves in different moments of the match is vital for every coach. Here we have two quotes from famous coaches, and Nagelsmann here emphasizes how important it is to thoroughly study how each team behaves tactically in different moments of the game, while Emery stressed the importance, but also how time-consuming it is to primarily use video for that. So our framework here will be effective in helping out in both situations and needs. As we said, correctly define and identifying match phases is the first step in conducting a detailed match analysis. We can see, for example, its importance in how teams might divide their training grounds in different shapes and areas, like this Bayern Munich's example here. We can see its importance, as we said. This process, we know it's quite subjective, as every club, coach, and technical staff might have different perspectives on the matter. And it's then essential to build a flexible and customizable framework that can be adapted to different needs. And so in collaboration with Chicago Fire and FC Lugano, we created a framework that it's based on Statsbomb 360 data, and that can be clearly adaptable to any specific needs. So for this particular project, we mostly used Swiss Super League 2022-2023 event and 360 data. We began with an initial pre-processing phase where we discarded some events we were not interested in, for example, fouls won, but also all non-match related events. In our database, we had often 2 or more events for the same time of play in the match. That could be, for example, a dribble situation for the in-possession team and a duel for the out-of-possession team. So since our main goal was to accurately define how each team behaves, we just took 1 event per timestamp, so not to have duplicate game phases. In our match phases definitions, we used a frame-by-frame approach in which the possession team was the team that actually controlled the ball in that single event, even if that was for a brief moment in the whole action sequence. And finally, not all events have a Statsbomb associated freeze frame. So for these events here, we define those as missing, but we will cover that later in the presentation. So now, talking about our phases definitions, we detected 3 main areas, being in possession, out of possession, and set pieces. And in the next few slides, we are going to divide each into their subphases. So starting off with in possession phases, we firstly define counterattack as entirely dependent on Statsbomb's event data. So if the play pattern is from counter, then an in-possession team is in a counterattack in-possession phase. Else, if the out-of-possession team is making a counter-pressing action towards the in-possession team, then the in-possession phase is a consolidate. And then we define the other 3 in-possession phases, build-up, progression, and finishing, depending on the ball location on the pitch, being in the own third, middle third, or final third. Moving on to the out-of-possession phases, we define regroup as if the in-possession team is making a counterattack, so again, depending on Statsbomb's event data. Similarly, we define counterpress if the out-of-possession team is making a counterpress action towards the ball carrier, so these 2 are also dependent on Statsbomb's event data entirely. For all the other phases, we didn't rely on the ball location, but we relied on the number of visible players that we might see in specific areas of the pitch. So for example, if we have at least 4 players in the attacking third, then the out-of-possession team is in a high block. Else, if we have at least 6 players in the own third, then the out-of-possession team is in either low press or low block, depending on a pressing action being recorded in Statsbomb's event data. Else, if we have at least 4 players in the middle of the pitch, then the out-of-possession phase is in either mid-press or mid-block, again, depending on a pressing action being recorded. Else, if none of these above rules apply, then we label the phase as unidentified. Finally, we just splitted the set pieces phases into two, set piece against a set piece 4, depending simply on which team has the ball. However, we introduced an additional rule here to better study the real game scenario. For example, we might have a short corner or an indirect free kick taken from the defensive half, or a throw-in that can develop into a proper open play scenario if the action lasts long enough. So for any set piece, if we have at least 5 events occurring, then all subsequent events gets assigned a phase depending on the in possession and out of possession definition that we just saw in the previous slides. We can see some examples here of how our rules assign phases to each freeze frame. In this case here, we have the ball, the blue team has the ball in the top right corner of the figure. And since the blue team is not making a counterattack and the red team is not making a counter-pressing action, and the ball being in the attacking third, then the blue team is in a finishing in possession phase, while the red team, having at least 6 players in their own third, they are in a low block since they're not making any pressing action. Another example here, the blue team is still in possession with the ball in their own third. They're not making a counterattack and they're not suffering any counter-pressing action, so they're in a build-up in possession phase. The red team, however, they have 4 players in the middle of the pitch. They are making a pressing action towards the ball carrier, so they're in a mid-press scenario. And as we define the out-of-possession phases, our framework being dependent on the player positions on the pitch and not the ball location, our framework allows for more realistic matchups, being non-symmetric. So we have a build-up and a mid-press, and we do not have necessarily a build-up and a high block. That could be the case if we would have assigned the out-of-possession phase to be dependent on the ball location, because otherwise the ball would be in the attacking third, so they would be in a high block, but they're actually in a mid-press, depending on the player's location. As we mentioned before, not all events have a phase assigned. That might be because the events didn't get classified by our rules, and we define these unidentified frames, and these represent 5% of total events, or events didn't get classified because they didn't have an associated freeze frame, and we define these as missing frames, and it represents 10.5%. In the example here, we can see the blue team in possession of the ball, and they're in a build-up because the ball is in the own third. And by looking at the red team, there's only 3 players in the attacking third, so as we defined before the high block, we need at least 4 players there, so the out-of-possession phase in this case assigned is unidentified. And for the next few slides, we have combined both unidentified frames and missing frames into one single category called unknown. To try and reduce the unknown events that get classified without incorrectly classifying them by loosening the rules too much, we decided that if less than 3 seconds go by between 2 correctly classified events, then all unclassified events within this time frame get assigned either one of the 2 correctly classified events. And with this new rule here, we go from 16% of total events getting classified as unknown to 12%. Now, moving on to possible applications of our project, we mainly focus on a few key areas that we find to be highly relevant in a club daily work. These might be opposition analysis, post-match reports, ad hoc queries that fully exploit the framework we created, and video integration. Now, starting off with the first example of opposition analysis, we used a radar plot here with all the key phases that we defined earlier, and we used, for this case, full season data on 3 different Swiss Super League teams. In this case, we start with FC Lugano's data. We can see from the top right corner of the radar plot all the major in possession phases definitions that we have, and we can see that Lugano is among the teams in the league with the highest percentages in all these phases, especially in build-up and progression, while without the ball, the highest values are in low press and low block. Now, adding Young Boys' data, the winners of the league that season, we can see that as Lugano, they have very high data in all in possession phases, especially in finishing in this case. They also have a quite high value in counter-attack, and without the ball, they have a very high value in high block. Finally, we add Winterthur's data, the newly promoted club that season. We can see that they have quite low values in all in possession phases. They have high value in counter-attack, and most importantly, without the ball, they have the highest values in all low block, low press, but also mid-block, mid-press. Now, we might want to go deeper, analyzing how each team's style of play changes, maybe between first half and second half, but actually it could be better to study how each team's behavior changes in different match status, because that might be the real reason behind possible differences seen between first and second half. We look again at Lugano's data here. If we look at the black radar plot here, so in losing situations, we can see that Lugano has the highest values in all progression and finishing with the ball, and they have a quite high value in eye block, so they're actively trying to reduce the gap with the opponents. Besides, when Lugano is in winning situations with the red radar plot here, we can see that they have the highest value in build-up with the ball, and they have higher value in all low block, low press, mid block, mid press, so they are sitting deeper when in winning situations. Now, if you look at all Swiss Super League teams across the season, and we look at both build-up percentages and low block percentages, we use this scatter plot in which the black arrows go from the small logo representing the losing situations to the big logo representing the winning situations. We can see that overall, throughout the whole figure, all bigger logos go to the right side of the figure, so every team, when winning, increase the percentages of low block. We can clearly see differences among teams. For example, Winterthur on the bottom right side almost double the percentages of low block when winning, while, for example, Young Boys and St. Gallen on the left side have similar values throughout the games. If we look now at the y-axis, so the build-up percentages, we can see, for example, again, Winterthur, but also Basel and Servette in the middle of the graph, with decreasing values in build-up when in winning situations, while Lugano, for example, increases the percentage of build-up when winning. We might be interested in having a chart that summarizes the flow of a match, and we might be interested in having the percentage of all events that gets classified in each phases of play for both teams in the match. In this case here, we used a simple bar plot that might be a quick to understand, simple single graph to just summarize the game with. In this case here, we see the blue bars for Lugano, and we clearly see that both progression and finishing has more than 20% of all phases assigned to those, and Servette without the ball has 20% of low block. And it might be interesting to know that in this game, Servette was one man down for the whole second half, so we can see why the graph is like that. We might be also interested in detecting possible long-term patterns throughout the season and comparing specific matches, because we might want to know through data which matches might be more interesting to then study through video. So in this case here, if we might look at this time series here to see exactly which matches might be more relevant to study. And here we just calculated an average on all phases of play we defined. We then calculated Euclidean differences among these values, and we can see for Lugano in this case, in which matches Lugano deviated the most from the average behavior throughout the season. And we can see, for example, that in these two specific matches, Lugano had deviated the most their behavior across the season. And so we might want to study these matches more thoroughly through video to see why Lugano played so differently against these two opponents. Now, as video analysis is today still the primary method for both opposition analysis and player scouting, we might want to have data to really speed up the whole video analysis process. We might be, for example, wanting to know all the action throughout the season where Lugano's opponents were in a finishing third, so in attacking third, while Lugano was not in a low block situation. And with this clip, we can see Lugano being in black and clearly being out of possession. We can see that from this long pass from the goalkeeper, the opponent reaches the attacking third, so being in a finishing in possession situation, while Lugano only has 4 players in the defensive third, so they're not yet in a low block. And Lugano only reaches the low block status just from the pass before the shot, where they have at least 6 players in the area. So we might want to have all the actions for this specific moment throughout the game, throughout the season, to analyze through video. Similarly, we might want to know all situations in which Lugano was in a low block defensively and then went into a counterattack. That might be interesting to study transitions, for example. From this clip, again, Lugano being in black, we can see that most of Lugano's players are in their own third, so they're in a quite deep low block. The opponents have possession of the ball in the middle of the pitch, so they are in a progression in possession phase, as we defined. And it's just from this ground duel here that Lugano gets possession of the ball and starts a counterattack. And we might be, as we said, wanting to know how and which of these moments throughout the season are, and then analyze these specifically through video, because that might speed up really well the process. So overall, the project started with the need to define match phases and classify them based on both event and 360 data. We then integrate this with technical staff suggestions to then create a customizable framework that can be adapted to different teams, needs, and contexts. As we saw in our examples, we might want to quickly change the rules that we define the phases with to just adapt it very quickly to different needs. And we then applied this framework to a number of applications, like we saw position analysis, post-match reports, ad hoc queries. But clearly in the future, we might be expanding to other applications, hopefully with full access to tracking data. And those might be going deeper at the player level, so making our framework more useful for scouting purposes, and also having complete integration with video, and that might be helpful with the integration between Scout and Statsbomb. So thank you very much.
We have a couple of minutes for questions, so if there's any questions about that, put your hands up and I'll come bring the mic.
Hi, Edoardo. Great presentation. I don't have a lot of money, so how can I replicate this without using 360?
I mean, it's been already kind of tough to do this with 360 because, as I said, I mean, it would be much better with full access to tracking data, because we saw in the example with just 3 players in the attacking third being labeled as unidentified. Clearly, we might have inferred that we have 3 players in attacking third. There are 7 players more we don't see. So we might say the red team is in a mid-block, mid-press, but we prefer to be more conservative in our rules. So without having access to 360 data, I mean, you should be even more conservative without saying maybe wrong things about how teams behaved in possession and without the ball. So it might be quite hard, I guess. So yeah, I mean, that's the sum.